can barely see. That was the first thought that ran through my head when I opened my eyes. It was dark, with the moonlight being the only thing illuminating my cage. I looked around the room, trying desperately to figure out where I was. It took me a few moments, but as my eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, I noticed a few things. Stone walls surrounded me on 3 sides. To my left was a series of steel bars with no door. The moonlight streamed in from a singular window on my right, also barred. I tried to call out to someone, anyone, to tell me where I was and why I was here, but there was no answer. I soon found that my arms and legs were numb, possibly from having been kneeling there for so long. I wasn't sure how long exactly. As I attempted to move my limbs, I learned I could only move them so far. Moving my arms forward caused them to stop just a few inches in front of me. Moving my legs was nearly impossible. I tried to stand, but the numbness overcame me, and I hit my knees again rather hard the moment I tried to put weight on my feet. It was nearly 10 minutes before I could stand, but when I did, I found I could only take a step or two from where I'd been kneeling, before something prevented me from going any further. Looking down at my ankles revealed blue shackles. They almost seemed watery, as if they weren't solid at all. The red cuffs that held my wrists also appeared liquidy but thick. I couldn't bring my mind to consider what they might possibly be. Lifting my gaze to the ceiling, I spotted one last thing in the room with me. But it made even less sense than the rest of my surroundings. There was a hatch, closed, but in the faint light I could barely make out a valve that most likely opened it. I wondered where it led. I wondered if it was locked. It didn't matter. With the cuffs on my wrists and ankles, it wasn't like I was going anywhere anytime soon. I didn't feel hungry or tired. I wondered if I had been forced to eat in my sleep. Had they drugged me? Keeping me awake enough that I could eat and drink, but out of it enough that I wouldn't remember anything? That seemed highly unlikely, but considering I didn't remember how I got here, it was one of many possibilities. My head grew heavy and suddenly I felt tired. I struggled to keep my eyes open, but after fighting for a few minutes I felt them close and everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, it was dark. The numbness in my knees was what had pulled me out of my dreamless sleep. I remember thinking about why I felt so tired. My initial thought of drugging seemed impossible now. I hadn't eaten anything, but I had suddenly felt the need to close my eyes. Despite not knowing how long it had been, I still didn't feel hungry. That was odd. If they weren't drugging me, why couldn't I remember eating anything? Why wasn't I hungry? And if I'd eaten, why haven't I felt the need to use the bathroom? In fact, there was no bathroom in my cell. Why hadn't I noticed that before? There wasn't even a bed. It was as if this place wasn't meant to cater to humans. If that were the case, then what was it supposed to hold and why was I here? Hours passed in silence. I stared blankly at the wall in front of me, trying to rack my brain for how I came to be here and why I was imprisoned. But I couldn't find anything in the depths of my mind, and it was like all of my memories had been wiped. It occurred to me that I didn't even know my own name, my age, or where I was from. There wasn't much else to do in this place but sit, sleep, and think. To me, it felt like days had passed. I couldn't see the sun to determine the time of day. Did I even know how to do that? How could I determine the time of day by the sun if I didn't even know my own name? I tried to find the answers in the shadows of my memories, but nothing came to me. And once again I felt the urge to close my eyes and sleep. I tried to fight it again, but to no avail. When next I awoke, the room felt different, as if something was watching me, but once again I was alone. I tried to ignore the growing feeling that someone or something was there, but I couldn't shake it. I called out again, expecting the silence to continue.
Sinful boy.
The response surprised me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice was feminine, and the sound of it almost broke my heart. It felt like a knife had been driven into me the moment I heard it. Who are you? I strained my eyes to see in the darkness. I looked immediately at the bars of my prison, expecting the person to be standing outside, but she wasn't there. I turned my head back to the wall in front of me and nearly screamed. I could see a girl dressed in a long dress. I could barely make out her features aside from the sad smile on her face and the long hair held in a pair of pigtails.
You'll remember me in time.
Perplexed, I continued to ask her questions, hoping for a straight answer. What's your name?
You already know it.
I stared dumbfounded. What did she mean by that? I turned my gaze to the floor and tried to think of where I could have seen that sad smile before. But there was nothing. A chill ran up my spine. Am I dead?
Not yet.
Yet? Does that mean I'm going to die? Why am I here? Did I do something to hurt you? Why can't I remember anything? What is this place? Mikenna, please, answer me! I stopped, confused. Where did that name come from? Sorry, I don't know why.
You said my name.
I lifted my head, straining to see more of her features, only to see that sad smile grow genuinely happy for a moment. But how did I know?
You're here because you must repent.
She suddenly changed the subject, and I tried to process what she was saying. Repent for what? What had I done? I honestly couldn't remember my name, let alone anything I could have done that I needed to repent for. I struggled to bring some sense of familiarity to the surface of my thoughts, but I honestly could not think of a single thing I needed to be sorry for.
I'm going to let you remember now.
Wait! Don't leave me! And then it all came flooding back. I knew my name, where I was from, everything. I was Lennard Valencia, living under the name Arlen Sinclair. I was the twin brother of the once Queen of Piranhas, Katherine. As everything came flooding back, I realized just how grave my sins were. Despite our childish protests that we could live together, our parents had decided that only one of us could inherit the throne. Father wanted it to be me, while Mother wanted it to be Katherine. Mother was only the queen consort, and therefore couldn't make any decisions that affected the country. I remember being afraid of what would happen when I was made heir. Would they take my sister away? Would I never see my twin again? The night before my father made his announcement, my sister convinced me to sneak away from the castle to the nearby beach.
Lennard, come on!
She lifted her skirt just enough that she could run. I followed quickly behind her, stumbling as the heels of my shoes became stuck. When we reached the water's edge, she started looking around for something. Katherine, what are you doing? She turned to me and smiled.
I'm going to cast a spell. I'm going to make it so that Mother and Father can't separate us.
I watched as she found a stick and began drawing marks in the sand. She set candles around the outside and lit them. Where did you learn to do this? I was suspicious of who could have taught her about something like this. We were children, and playing with magic and spirits was dangerous. I didn't want her to get hurt.
I read about it in a book Lady Luciana gave me. It'll be just fine, Lennard. I promise. No one's going to take either of us away.
Could she really keep that promise? I didn't quite believe it, but I sat down in the sand and watched as she began to chant some kind of prayer, asking the spirits around us to grant her wish. She danced around and, quite frankly, looked a little mad. Had anyone stumbled upon us at this late hour, they might have reported to my father that she needed to be locked away, which would make my fears come true. I just watched, and secretly hoped that it would work. Even if it isn't a spirit, if anyone can answer our prayers, I would be grateful. I don't want to be king, I want my sister! When she went quiet, the only answer my sister received was the crashing of the waves. How do you know if it worked? She was quiet. I thought she was just upset, but when I stood up and approached her, I could see she was staring off into space. Her eyes were glazed over, almost as if she had fallen asleep on her feet. I touched her shoulder and she jumped back as if I'd burned her. Katherine?
I'm sorry, Lennard. Doesn't look like it worked.
She looked sad. I pulled her into a hug and shook my head. That spell may not have granted our wish, but I know something that will.
What?
I led her toward the water's edge and reached into my pocket, producing a small bottle with paper inside. It was stoppered and otherwise ordinary. This ocean is special. If you cast a bottle into it with your wish written on a piece of paper inside, it will grant your wish. I lifted my arm and threw the bottle into the water. That was the last time I could call Katherine my sister. That night our father died. He'd stayed in his study and didn't come to bed. When Mother went looking for him the next morning, he had been mutilated. A servant was believed to have been the culprit, but with no evidence, there was nothing anyone could do. After his funeral, my mother pushed to have my sister placed upon the throne. I was placed in the care of the castle's head butler and adopted as his son. I was then made Katherine's manservant. That was when my name became Arlen. It didn't matter to me if I was her brother or her servant. We shared the same blood, and I would do anything, even dive into the great depths of hell for my sister. We spent a lot of time after that on the beach. My sister left affairs of state to her advisors, preferring to enjoy her time as queen and live in leisure, rather than care for her country. Wanting every finery and luxury she could have, my sister taxed the people to no end. There was one exchange that made me realize how much my sister had changed.
Please, Your Majesty. Our people are starving. You've taken everything from us. There's no food, no money. My mother and father are already dead.
The woman who pleaded with Katherine was not much older than the two of us. She was tall and beautiful with long red hair, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. My sister would not heed her words and ordered her and the rest of her group of villagers to leave. A young man who was among them began to insult Katherine. He called her a demon and threatened to turn the kingdom against her. He was executed 2 weeks later. Mother did her best to reason with my sister, begged her not to kill the man. She even went so far as to strike Katherine. She died in much the same way as our father that night. There were none left who would oppose my sister, and I was the dutiful servant. Things began to change one afternoon when Katherine was visiting the neighboring kingdom of Talentra for Prince Kayden's birthday. She had long admired the handsome prince with the blue hair. We were walking in the town as my sister listed off the things she would need for the night's festivities. I made a mental list in my head as she called off everything she wanted. Many of the things listed had nothing to do with getting ready for the party, but I would oblige anyway. That was when I saw her. A beautiful young girl with long green hair, held in pigtails with a gentle smile and beautiful eyes. I'd never seen anyone so lovely before. Her eyes met mine and I managed to smile, but I was quickly drawn back to my sister when she snapped at me to pay attention. I saw the girl again that night, and this time so did Katherine. The girl with the green hair was being escorted by the prince. I felt my heart sink. I had hoped to take the time to get to know this vision of loveliness, but I found that love at first sight gave way to a broken heart in the space of a few hours. Prince Kayden's new companion did not escape my sister's notice either. I could feel the anger rising inside her. I spent the next hour listening to her cry and scream as I packed our things to return home that night. She swore vengeance and that the prince would be hers. The next afternoon we were on the beach where all of this had begun. I had not given up on my wish for the green-haired girl. I wrote my wish upon a piece of paper, placed it in a bottle, and cast it into the ocean.
Why are you doing that?
I told you when we were children, did I not, my lady? If you cast your wish into the sea inside a bottle, it is sure to come true. Would my lady like to try? Perhaps the sea can grant her the prince's heart. I had hoped the suggestion might cheer her up, but Katherine wrinkled her nose as if in disgust.
It's nothing but a peasant's game. Besides, won't you make all my wishes come true, Arlen?
My lady?
You're the only one who can. I want you to kill her. Kill her and ensure my love's heart to me.
It was an order, one I couldn't refuse. My sister's happiness was on the line. Would I choose my own over hers? Would I kill the woman I loved for the sake of my sister? It was a question I turned over and over in my head for hours. I left for Talentra early the next morning. I had set myself up in a small room in the local inn. There were 2 ways I could go about doing this. The quickest would be to catch the girl off guard. It would be quick and simple, but due to her relationship with Prince Kayden, I knew it would be nearly impossible to get her alone, unless I convinced her to trust me, to meet me away from prying eyes. What was I thinking? Was I seriously planning to kill this girl? Just because my sister wanted the prince to herself? How could I allow myself to do this? She was innocent! As those thoughts stirred around in my head, I left my room, barely speaking a word to the innkeeper as I headed out into the town. Perhaps I'd find some information in the market square. I didn't even know the girl's name. The market was crowded, which wasn't surprising. Stalls lined the long streets on both sides. Vendors yelled about their fruits, salted meats, clothing, and fineries. In the shadows of the crowds, thieves waited to catch unknowing passers-by in their distraction. I watched as a little boy no older than I was that night on the beach cut free a man's coin purse and ran off with it. Minstrels played their instruments for whatever coin the generous public would offer. The male singer had a lilting voice of gold. He looked hungry. I felt pity for the boy for a moment, who could have been a younger me with his sandy bird's nest of tangled hair. Boy, what is your name?
Oliver.
I could tell by his accent that he wasn't from this kingdom nor my own. I pulled a few coins from my pouch and offered them to him. I'll give you this in exchange for information. I'm looking for a girl. I described the girl with the green hair to the boy, and a big smile formed across his face.
I know her. She works at the palace, she does. She's a celebrity around here. She went from maid to the prince's fiancée in a matter of a year.
Fiancé? I felt my heart shatter in that instant. Numbly, I gave the boy the money. I turned and walked away. I could hear the boy calling after me, wanting to make sure I heard his thanks. But while my mind registered the sound, my body would not turn to look back at him. I continued down the street, numb to everything else around me. I felt trapped. I loved a girl I didn't even know. That girl was engaged to the prince whom my sister loved. Was it really love, or was it blind infatuation? To this day, I'm not quite sure. I felt as if this mission was impossible. How was I to get the girl who was to be the queen of this kingdom alone so that I might end her life? It was impossible. I knew, though, that to return to Katherine without having accomplished what she sent me here to do would lead to my death. I had sworn to serve her in all things. If that meant casting aside my own heart to make my queen and sister happy, I would. Aside from what I learned from the boy and a few tidbits about where the castle was located, I hadn't had much in the way of luck that day. I returned to the tavern at sunset. Dinner was being served to a loud group of travelers. I had hoped the tavern, being smaller and out of the way, wouldn't have much traffic, but apparently I was wrong. I approached the bar where the tavern keep's son was pouring drinks for a young maid to carry to one of the tables.
What can I do for you?
Just wine, please, and some dinner. It's rather lively tonight.
Aye, it's always packed this time of year. You're lucky you got a room when you did. We'll be booked full by tomorrow.
Why's that?
There's a festival in a few days. Tomorrow, you'd best stay clear of the square. It'll be packed with people decorating and setting up stalls. Happens every year. The Festival of Love and Beauty. Many townsfolk take advantage of this day to get married. Others hope to find love. And the town's most beautiful girls compete to be named the Queen of Love and Beauty.
What does the girl who wins get? By this point, the maid who'd been serving drinks placed a bowl of hot stew and a trencher of bread in front of me. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I forced myself to take my first spoonful.
Oh, a chance to attend the noble's ball that night, and to dance with Prince Kayden.
A ball, huh? My sister was probably invited, but without me to attend to her, and with her current grudge against Prince Kayden and the green-haired girl, I highly doubted she'd attend. Perhaps I could still find a way in. I began to list off in my head the names of nobles who might attend whose servants I knew. Perhaps I could convince one of them to get me inside. The morning of the festival came, and the tavern was just as loud as it had been for the past few days when I came down for a quick breakfast. Cold meat and cheese, a bit of bread, and some water later, and I was out the front door. The market was louder than the last time I'd been through it. Merchants practically screamed about their wares, hoping visiting foreigners might spend their gold on the expensive items made specifically for this wonderful event. I turned down a man who tried to convince me that I needed a new vest for my formal wear. He was quite convincing, but I had to remind myself I was not there for pleasure, nor could I afford to spend money granted to me by Katherine specifically for this mission on my own comforts. For now, I would bide my time. As I entered the large town square, I spotted a few familiar noble faces, none of which were the ones I was hoping for. I walked among the crowd, stopping occasionally when a young girl would try to catch my attention. They were all pretty in their own right, but my mission was the only thing that was on my mind. I was turning down a fourth girl when a hooded figure set up at a small table caught my eye. Her robes were made of fine silks of purples and pinks, decorated by embroidered stars. On the table in front of her was a crystal ball and a stack of cards. A fortune teller. I never quite believed in the idea of someone being able to predict the future by looking at a bunch of funny and sometimes disturbing pictures on a deck of cards, or pretending to look into a large ball of painted glass. I watched in amusement as the couple sitting in front of the so-called seer squealed in glee. The woman kissed the man and off they went. Shaking my head, I turned to walk away when the fortune teller called out to me.
Come now, young man. I see you doubt my ability. Please, allow me to read you. Let me prove to you that I am the real deal.
Her voice was vaguely familiar. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought I'd heard it before. I opened my mouth to tell her I didn't have any money I could spend, but she cut me off.
Free of charge, young man. I wouldn't dream of taking your money when I have something to prove.
I turned away from her once again to search the crowd for one of the servants I might know.
The person you are looking for isn't there, and won't be for some time. Come now, please. Join me.
Annoyed and knowing she wouldn't let me alone until I agreed, I walked over and sat down in front of the woman. Sitting on the cushion in front of her now, I could see her face. Well, the upper half of her face. The lower half was covered by a veil made of the same fabric as her robe, starting at the bridge of her nose. Striking blue eyes stared out at me from beneath the bit of pink bangs that hung beneath the hood of her cloak. The odd thing was, every time I tried to focus on something other than her eyes, her face would grow blurry in my sight. I blamed it on lack of real sleep and settled my sight on hers.
Crystal, or cards?
You tell me. I didn't mean to sound so angry, but I was getting frustrated.
Cards it is then. Let go of your negative emotions. Ask the cards your question. Think hard on it.
Question? I didn't have a damn question. I just wanted to finish this godforsaken mission and go home. Letting my anger fade, I thought about it. Perhaps there was one question I wanted the answer to. I watched her shuffle the cards, cut them into 3 piles, and indicate to me to decide which order to put them together again in. She placed 3 cards on the table in front of me. The entire time she was doing this, one question became clear in my mind. Does the girl with the green hair feel the same for me? Does she even know I exist? The fortune teller turned over the first card.
The Ace of Cups. Perhaps your question is about a girl? I sense the seeds of love in you.
I scoffed. Lucky guess. This is the Love and Beauty Festival after all. She turned over the next card.
The Queen of Wands, in the reverse position.
She said nothing more and moved on to the last card.
The Tower. I see. You are troubled. You have something you must accomplish. Concerning this girl, something sinister. It will end in violence and destruction.
My heart began to race as her eyes studied mine. She knew. There was no way in hell she didn't know. How? Who was she? Before I could leave, she grabbed my hand and I felt myself grow dizzy. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Her eyes bore into mine and for a moment I swore I could see her lips moving, but no sound emerged. I felt a shiver run up my spine as I broke eye contact. I scrambled to my feet and rushed away from her. I had to end this. I had to get back to my sister and forget the girl with the green hair. Forget Prince Kayden. Forget all of this.
Sir! Sir!
I searched the crowd only to see the serving maid from the tavern. Panting, she forced her way through the crowd to me and offered me a rolled up piece of parchment.
This was delivered to the tavern for you. They said it was urgent, so Father sent me to find you. I have to get back. I've been searching for you for too long.
I thanked her and hastily offered her some gold for her trouble. As she ran off, I looked at the parchment. It was thin, probably a short message then. The seal that held it closed was my sister's. Damn it. She needs to be more careful. If they learn who I am and I accomplish what I came here to do, it could mean trouble for Katherine. I broke the seal and unraveled the letter. There was but one sentence in loopy, careful penmanship.
Kill them all.
Kill them all? What did she mean by that? What could possibly have happened? Terrified of being found out, I tore the letter to shreds and tossed it into the nearest brazier. I had to end this quickly. That evening, I managed to convince the servant of one of the nobles, a young man I'd known for years, to get me into the castle. I'd simply told him I was looking for new employment and to leave Katherine's service. He believed me and agreed to get me in so I could speak to the nobles here. I managed to disappear into a crowd of noblemen as the winner of the festival's Queen of Love and Beauty title was introduced to those in attendance. To my surprise, it was the girl with the green hair. That's right, she was a maid in the castle and probably lived in the village. I wonder if this was Prince Kayden's way of fixing it so he had an excuse to dance with her tonight. Damn, I need to find a way to talk to her. My first attempt failed miserably. As I danced my way across the floor to her during a particularly popular dance that required the repeated change of partners, I became so flustered and nervous that I could barely tell her my name. She must have found it sweet as she was ever kind to me in the few minutes our hands had touched. I remember faintly being able to smell her perfume. Lilies. Her hand had been so soft in mine that I could scarce focus on what I had been trying to say. The rest of the night continued like this. I tried at one point to flat out ask her for a dance and couldn't get the words out. Thinking I was a bumbling fool, the prince had me escorted away. Now I was stuck with a group of rather gossipy young nobles. I hadn't been paying much attention until one of them flat out addressed me.
Excuse me, Arlen, was it? What do you think?
I'm sorry, I must have been lost in my thoughts. What were we talking about?
Queen Katherine of Paranus. She's abysmal, isn't she?
What makes you say that?
I heard a group of villagers came to her asking her to let up on her insane tax so that they might eat. I can't believe how she treats her own people. It's so—
Excuse me, my lord?
To my surprise, it was the girl with the green hair standing beside me.
I believe you were trying to ask me to dance earlier. I'd like to say I accept.
Her lips were formed into the brightest smile I had ever seen. She was offering me her hand. I took it and left the group of people with her. The waltz began and I placed one hand on her waist and held her hand with the other.
Forgive Prince Kayden. He can be quite jealous.
Think nothing of it.
Your name is Arlen, correct? You're the manservant of Queen Katherine of Paranus, are you not? I was under the impression she was not invited this evening.
Forgive me, my lady.
Mikenna. I'm no lady. Just a maid in service to the prince.
Mikenna. Her name was like honey on my lips. I wished to leave the Queen's service. I convinced a friend to help me inside that I might find a job under one of the nobles here. It hurt to lie to her. Why did it hurt so much?
Is she cruel to you? I've heard from Prince Kayden how she taxes her people until they have nothing left. I can't imagine she'd be much better to her servants.
The way she seemed worried for me broke my heart. She's never been cruel to me, Mikenna, but I've worked the same position for nearly 14 years. I believe I have the skills to be head butler or manservant to a lord. As a lady's manservant, my duties only require me to bring her afternoon tea. The rest would put me in a butler's position. Why was I being so cruel? Katherine had never harmed me. I had always been happy just to see her happy.
Prince Kayden is looking for a new manservant. I'll put in a good word for you. Put in an application with the head butler before you leave. I'm sure he'd review it. In fact, I'll make sure he does.
I was in no position to say no at this point, so I just nodded. The dance ended, and just as she turned to return to the prince, I called out to her. Mikenna! You live in the town, correct? Allow me to escort you home after the ball. I'll be returning to the tavern I'm currently staying in. She accepted, and rushed away. With the party coming to a close, I awaited Mikenna by the stables. A carriage had been arranged to take her home, and by some miracle she had convinced the prince to allow me to be the one to escort her. When asked about my application by the prince himself, I promised to return in the morning with it and all of my references. The carriage ride itself was fairly silent. Mikenna tried her hardest to get me to talk, but between my pounding heart and the pounding that had begun in my head, I was barely able to force myself to speak. It wasn't until we drew closer to her home that the conversation actually caught my true attention.
Prince Kayden is almost convinced she'll send someone to kill me. He knows she's obsessed with him and wants to marry him. He fears for my safety, but I know he'll keep me safe.
Forgive me, Mikenna, but who?
Queen Katherine. Apparently she tried to propose to Prince Kayden, which is why she wasn't invited to the ball. He explained to her that she was too late, that he was already betrothed, and she became furious.
Kill them all.
Now I understood.
Prince Kayden wants to find some way to remove her from the throne. He's just hoping she'll do something that justifies an invasion. I want to do something to help him, but he says it's too dangerous. I hate feeling so useless.
I'm sure the prince just fears for your safety. If he cares about you as much as you say, it would break his heart if something were to happen to you. The carriage came to a stop. I climbed out and helped Mikenna down to the ground. Her house was small and quaint. The carriage pulled away a few moments later as I walked her to the door. Good night, Mikenna.
Good night, Arlen. Be safe on your way back to the tavern. Would you walk with me to the castle tomorrow? I don't normally travel by carriage, only on the evenings when I'm not working.
Of course. I now had my opportunity. There was a forest road between here and the castle. If I could draw her from the path, perhaps it would give me the opportunity I needed. The next morning I met Mikenna at her door and we began down the forest path to the castle. Once the deed was done, I would head straight back to my sister. I checked out of the tavern with all that I had brought and left a generous tip for the staff. Hidden in my coat sleeve was a simple dagger I'd purchased back in Paranus. I had bought a basket and some breakfast from the tavern in the hopes of surprising Mikenna. I'm sure His Highness won't mind if we're a few minutes late. When was the last time you had a decent breakfast? I led her from the road to a clearing I could see just beyond the trees.
I really don't know if we should. I could lose my job. And shouldn't you impress him by showing up on time?
We're already a little early. A few more minutes won't make a difference. I turned to her, stopping at the edge of the trees. Besides, there's something I have to tell you.
What's that?
For a moment, I couldn't answer. I felt tears begin to well up in my eyes. She had been nothing but kind to me, but here I was, planning to end her life.
Arlen?
I'm sorry, Katherine. I can't. I won't hurt her. She's innocent. She's done nothing wrong. I felt my hand reach toward her, as if it wasn't mine. What? No! No!
For what? What could you possibly have to be sorry for?
My knife slid from my jacket into my hand, and then into her stomach. What have I done? I'm sorry. I'm sorry! I hit my knees, her bloody body falling into my lap. She stared up at me with glossy eyes, her hand reaching up toward my face, grasping for something that wasn't there.
Thank you.
Thank you? Why was she thanking me? I sobbed louder. I couldn't stay here. I had to go before they found me. I gently moved her from my lap to the ground, grabbed the basket and my belongings, and ran. I had been running for a while. I'd cut through the woods to travel around the outside of the town. I hadn't initially been planning to return to town, but the smell of smoke and the sound of screams drew me back. What was happening? I know Katherine had said to kill them all, but I had been hoping the death of Mikenna would be enough to quell her thirst for blood. Unfortunately, I was wrong. As I left the edge of the woods to return to the road just a short walk from the entrance to town, I saw it. Fire. The town was ablaze. I could see through the smoke the colors of the Royal Guard of Piranhas. They were laughing and hollering. My throat ran dry as I started walking toward the entrance. I had to stop this. No one else needed to suffer. Mikenna was dead and my sister could pursue Prince Kayden. Whether he would suspect my sister or not, I don't know. I only took a few shaky steps toward the town entrance when a hand grasped my shoulder and spun me around.
Arlen.
It took me a few minutes to recognize the male voice that was speaking to me. Kieran, my adopted brother. He had been recently raised to captain of the Royal Guard when the last captain resigned. My adopted father had subtly pushed Katherine to give him the promotion, despite how young and inexperienced he was. Kieran was just as cruel, if not crueler, than Katherine, and he took pleasure in torturing the citizens of Piranhas, all under the guise of keeping the peace. Growing up, he had been nothing but a bully when my adopted father wasn't looking. I never fought back for fear of being turned out of my home and losing my job. Kieran? What are you doing here?
Didn't you receive the message from Her Highness? We're to kill all the girls in Talentra with green hair.
What? Why?
No one had heard from you, and Queen Katherine didn't know the girl's name. We'd expected you back by now, but when there was no word, Her Highness sent us to finish the job, thinking you'd been caught.
Anger spread through me. For the first time in my life, I felt pure rage and loathing toward my sister. I didn't want to risk this being traced back to Piranhas in case Prince Kayden sought to retaliate. Now they know we're here and we've murdered innocent people. End this now and return to Piranhas.
Hey there, little brother. I'm the captain of the guard here.
No more. I punched him square in the jaw, seething with anger and hatred.
Ah!
Your queen is now in danger, you idiot! Pull back and return to Piranhas before Prince Kayden decides to kill us all here and now, and then march on our kingdom. Without waiting for a response, I turned and started back toward Piranhas. Praying I arrived in time. It was late into the night when I did arrive. News had traveled fast of the destruction of Talentra's capital. I had to take back alleys just to reach the palace. The people were rioting. What had happened, the death of all those innocents, had finally turned my sister's people against her. Kieran had not followed me home, and since he had taken our main forces with him, the guard left here were severely outnumbered. I stopped in the shadow of a building to watch a group of people in an open square near the cathedral. They had piled wood and furniture to form bonfires, and in the center of it all, upon a makeshift platform, stood a familiar woman. I recognized her as the young woman who had come begging for relief from my sister's taxes. Her hair was shorter, and she was clad in red armor rather than the clothes of a farmer's daughter. But that was definitely her.
Catherine Valencia has taxed us to the point of starvation. We have begged her for relief from this subjugation, but we have received nothing. Those that speak out against her policies are unjustly labeled as traitors and executed without trial. And now she has sent her guard to kill innocent people, all because she wanted to marry the Prince of Talentra. Enough is enough! We must force the tyrant queen from her throne and place our trust in Prince Kayden to appoint someone who will treat us better. Down with the tyrant!
Damn, a rebellion. In my heart, I had known all along this might happen. Katherine was never the careful one, and her disregard for the health and safety of her people was enough reason for them to rebel. Now, with what I've done, the anger of the civilians was even worse. I had to return to my sister. As the masses lifted their voices to echo the woman's cries, I turned and hastened myself to the castle. It would be nearly half an hour till I reached the palace. As I entered through the servants' entrance, my adopted father met me just beyond the door. He didn't look pleased. I wasn't surprised with the way things were turning out. I reached for my tailcoat by the door and pulled it over my dirty shirt. Where is Katherine? I busied myself with brushing the dust from my shoulders.
Her Majesty is in her chambers with Lady Luciana. You have some nerve, being gone so long and then acting as if nothing has happened.
The mission took me longer than I anticipated. Kieran's arrival didn't help things. Prince Kayden is sure to know now that the order was given from Her Majesty. I must speak with her on what to do next. It's tea time. Give me the tray and I will take it to her. Without waiting for a response, I picked up the gold tray with brioche toast and my sister's favorite rosehip tea. I turned to my father for a moment. Watch the gates. I don't know when they intend to strike, but they will. And I don't trust the servants not to help them.
How dare you order me? Are you suggesting the staff would turn on their queen?
I am. And you best believe they would, Father. I said nothing more and headed on my way up to Katherine's chambers. They were located high up on the 4th floor of the East Wing. As I made my way through the halls, I watched the servants I passed. They whispered to each other as they pointed to me. I knew they were talking about what I'd done, but I didn't care. I would wallow in my guilt later. Katherine was most important now. I knocked on my sister's door and received the order to enter. I almost dropped the tray as I entered. There was a woman here with my sister, dressed in robes of purples and pinks, embroidered with stars. The only difference was that her face wasn't covered. The fortune teller. I knew I'd seen her before. You! She turned to look at me and smirked.
Ah, the hero returns.
My sister's advisor. Why did I not recognize her in Talentra? I vaguely remembered how her face grew blurry every time I looked at anything but her eyes.
Arlen!
Katherine ran to me to hug me.
I heard about what happened from Luciana. You did so well.
She looked so pleased. I took a step back away from her. Seeing her so happy melted my heart, but the reminder of what I needed to do to make her that happy made me sick. You sent the guard.
When you didn't come back right away, I was worried you'd been caught. I sent Kieran to finish the job. I hope you don't mind.
She was being so sweet, as if she'd been worried about me this whole time. I knew she just wanted Mikenna dead. Because of that, they know who issued the order. They know you wanted her dead. The people are rioting.
Nothing a little show of force won't handle.
You were there, in Talentra. I only realized it now. Why?
Just to ensure you did your job. Had you changed your mind, the spell I cast would have ensured you finished the job.
Prince Kayden is aware by now it was you who wanted the girl dead. He was looking for an excuse to invade and annex Paranis. He's going to come here and attack us.
And who told you that?
The girl.
You spoke to her? Luciana was correct that you were having second thoughts then.
No! I had to get close to her in order to get her alone. Mikenna told me all those things thinking she could trust me. I didn't...
Mikenna? You knew her name even? How adorable. The queen orders her servant to kill the object of her love's affection, only to fall in love with his target.
Is this true, Arlen?
No! I didn't fall in love with her. I barely even knew her. Thankfully, before the discussion could continue, the doors burst open behind me. There stood my father, panting and disheveled. He tried to adjust himself as he caught his breath, straightening his tailcoat and smoothing his hair.
Your Majesty, forgive my intrusion, but the Talentran forces have invaded, led by Prince Kayden himself. The men we sent to Talentra are all dead.
Barricade the gates! Don't let anyone in!
I'm afraid, though we tried, the servants let them in.
What? I warned you!
There were too many to stop them. They're looting the palace and leaving. What would you have us do?
Summon the army.
We have no standing army. The town was left highly undermanned when Her Majesty sent Kieran and his men to Talentra. He took most of the guard with him.
Then kill them all! Luciana, you can do that, right?
I'm afraid I don't have magic that strong.
Father, close the doors and help me barricade them. The three of us can still put up a fight. Now! He scrambled to close the large doors as I helped him pull Katherine's armoire in front of them.
I doubt this will hold them very long.
It doesn't need to hold them very long. Just long enough. I started to pull off my jacket and shirt. Katherine, take off your clothes.
Excuse me?
We're twins. They'll take me and you can get away. There's a secret passage behind your bookcase. The one we used as kids to sneak down to the beach. You'll have to go alone. If Luciana or Father follow you, they'll suspect something. Run away from here, far from Paranis and Talentra.
But Lennard!
It broke my heart that this is what it took for her to call me by my name again. I know, Katherine. I will pay the price for both our sins. Just promise me you'll change. Become the girl you were when we were children. Seek help. I turned away as I began to remove my pants, and Luciana helped her with her dress. It didn't take long before I was helping her tie her hair the way I wore mine. Tentatively, I took her crown and placed it on my head, then pulled the ponytail from my hair. Aside from the fact that she had makeup on, you couldn't tell who was the brother and who was the sister.
Lennard.
Her face looked so different in that moment. Like she was a little girl again that day father and mother told us only one could take the throne. I reached out and pulled her tightly into my arms, hugging her one last time. I love you, Katherine. Now go. I pushed her toward the bookcase while my father pushed it out of the way, revealing a small trapdoor. Crouching down, she would be just small enough to fit through. She turned to try to say something as I closed the door in her face and latched the small metal lock. I nodded to my father, who put the bookcase back in front of the door. Everyone remain calm. Act as if I'm Katherine.
The little prince has become a man. You are quite the hero, Your Majesty.
I couldn't tell if Luciana was making fun of me or not, but as the battering ram ripped the bedroom doors open, she stepped in front of me. I could see some type of magic energy forming at the tips of her fingers. As the soldiers pushed the armoire forward, letting it loudly connect with the floor, they poured into the room. One of them, an archer, let an arrow fly, striking Luciana in the chest. She fell to her knees in front of me, but didn't lower her arm. Words in a language I did not recognize left her lips in quick succession, and then a ball of searing flames flew from her fingers, engulfing the archer. Another soldier stepped forward and cut her down. More followed at their backs, the farm girl in the red armor, and Prince Kayden. He looked angry. One of the soldiers caught my father's arms and held them. Another came up behind me, grabbing me. I tried to wrench myself free as Kayden approached me, and slapped me across the face. You disrespectful man!
You lost the right to respect when you ordered your men to kill my fiancée, Katherine Valencia, tyrant queen of Paradis. Then you set your army on my kingdom. Why? All because you wanted me to marry you? You're insane!
You wanted to marry a common maid! Life isn't some fairy tale, my prince. You should have realized that spurning a political marriage with me for a common whore would cause open war.
Your father signed a treaty that promised peace between our kingdoms. In it, he promised all hostilities from Paradis would cease. Should for any reason that promise be broken, Talantra would have every right to invade and annex Paradis. Your people are my people now, and they call for your execution.
You have no right to judge me. I am a god-anointed queen.
You are a demon who has left people to die for your own comfort. You do not deserve your crown.
He ripped the crown from my head.
Take her to the dungeons. The day is won.
As the guard dragged me past her, the farm girl's eyes met mine. I smirked. I won. Katherine was safe and I would pay for what I'd done to Mikenna. The farm girl opened her mouth to say something, but then stopped herself.
Miss Mayra, what is the matter?
Nothing, Your Highness.
The trial had been short. I had pled not guilty in the hopes of retaining the guise of my sister. But I didn't put up a fight when they decided my fate. In the course of a day, I had been sentenced to death. My execution would be carried out in the morning. For now, I sat in a stone cell. I was free to walk around, but the bars on the windows and the bars making up one side of the cell and the door made it impossible for me to escape. That was fine, though. I didn't plan on escaping. I needed to pay for what I'd done. They'd given me a dinner of stale bread and hard cheese. It sat on the wooden tray on the table untouched. If I ate, I felt I'd vomit, so I refrained. It had been quiet since my arrival. There were very few prisoners in the dungeon. My father had been released. There was no evidence linking him to what happened. Part of me was glad. I didn't want to see him suffer for what I'd done. It wasn't like I loved the man. He had taken me in because he was ordered to. I doubt he cared about me at all. I was pulled from my musings as the doors opened. I hadn't expected visitors, least of all Prince Kayden, but there he stood. He ordered the guard to leave us, and I saw the mask of royalty fade. Now he looked drawn and tired. It was a large change from the handsome, energetic prince who had danced with Mikenna at the party. What do you want?
Katherine, what did you hope to gain by all of this? During the trial, you said it was revenge for my turning down your marriage proposal. But there's more to it than that, isn't there?
He sat himself on the wooden stool on the other side of the cell. I've always loved you, since the day we met. I knew Katherine like the back of my hand. The day of your birthday ball, I saw you with Mikenna. That girl, and I snapped. I wanted nothing more than for her to be dead.
And so you sent someone into my kingdom to kill her, while you arranged to send me a marriage proposal. Your manservant was at the festival. He lied to get into the castle, saying he wanted to resign his position under you and work for me. Micaiah turned up dead the next morning.
Micaiah? I thought Arlen said her name was Mikenna.
Princess Micaiah Aronoff of Rayeria. Her father sent her to me in disguise as we worked out the details of a betrothal. The whole point of the engagement was to lure you into attacking. We had known for some time what kind of person you were. Your people had petitioned me to intervene many times before. We just needed you to break the treaty.
Princess Micaiah? She had attended many events in Paranis in the past, but we hadn't seen her for quite some time. Her face flashed across my mind's eye, and it was only then that I saw it. Surprise overtook me. Of course, it all makes sense now. She spoke of how she wanted to help him, but felt useless. Now I understood. Why did she live in the village?
It was her idea. As our feelings for each other grew, she feared being so close to each other would tempt us into each other's beds. Living as a maid, she believed it might cause us both problems. Of course, neither of us were aware that the townspeople already knew of our betrothal.
Why did you come here?
I simply came seeking answers to questions I still had. Are you really Katherine Valencia?
I am Katherine Valencia, Queen of Paranis.
Very well. May God have mercy on you, for I will not.
I watched him as he left. I waited until he was gone, then threw myself upon the cot I'd been sitting on, and cried myself to sleep. I awoke to the sounds of the door opening again. I expected it to be the guards come to fetch me for execution. I had not expected the farm girl with the red hair. I could tell she was angry from the way she slammed the cell door shut and gruffly ordered the guard away. I sat up as she approached me. Being older than I was, she roughly grabbed the collar of my Katherine's dress and hoisted me to my feet.
Why are you lying?
What are you talking about? Angrily, she shoved me back onto the cot. I winced as my back connected with the stone wall behind it.
You're not that bitch of a queen. You're the manservant. Don't think I didn't notice you were her twin the first time I came to the palace. Why didn't you tell them the truth? You're going to die. And for what? Her? She's a monster!
If that's what you believe, why didn't you say something at the trial?
Prince Kayden forbade it. He seems to admire your willingness to die for your sister's sins. How could you just let her brother die when he's innocent?
I'm not innocent! I rose to my feet and met the girl's eyes. I killed Mikenna.
Under your sister's orders?
I could have stopped at any time. I didn't. The fault is mine.
That doesn't excuse all the other things she did. She executed my husband. She starved her people all that she could have the best of everything. She turned you, her twin, out of her family and made you a servant. Ugh! How can you stand up for her?
Because she's my sister. And I love her. It was a simple answer, really, but it was the truth. I loved Katherine with all my heart, despite all the things she'd done to me.
Where did she go?
I don't know.
Liar! Where did she go?
I don't know. She escaped the palace, and where she went from there, I don't know. You'll get no information from me.
Then I hope you rot in hell.
And then she was gone, and I was alone again. No one else came. I did not sleep. I simply awaited my death. They didn't bother placing a hood over my head as the guard led me out of the dungeons into a horse-drawn carriage in the courtyard. They bound my hands and tossed me into it. I pushed myself to sit up as the carriage pulled out of the courtyard and onto the cobbled road that led into town. There was barely a soul as we passed houses and shops. It didn't take me long to realize where they all were. The carriage came to a halt in a large square outside the cathedral. It was the same place the citizens were gathered when I returned. The bonfires and debris had been cleared away. All that was left was a tall platform with a guillotine. So that was to be my end. As the guards approached the carriage, they dragged me out and through the crowd. As I passed the townsfolk, they threw vegetables and mud at me. I stumbled as some hit my face. The guards yanked me back to my feet. I barely had time to shake it from my eyes when they forced me up the stairs to the platform. Waiting atop it were the executioner, a priest, Prince Kayden, and the farm girl.
Katherine Valencia, you are sentenced to death by beheading. Do you have any last words?
I said nothing. The executioner helped one of the guards force me to my knees. They lifted the bar that would hold me in place and forced my neck into the divot. The bar closed and I heard the distinct sound of metal latching. The priest was praying, but I barely paid him any mind. I could hear the crowd yelling to kill me already. My eyes searched their faces. I saw Kieran at their head with my father. My father met my eyes and simply nodded, his eyes solemn. Kieran smirked. He must have found this amusing. I wonder if he knew it was me. I could hear in the distance the toll of the old bell tower. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, it's tea time.
As the blade was released, I heard a cry from the crowd. My eyes found the source, and inside a hood of brown, I saw a face staring back at me that looked like mine. I was back in the cell. My mind was reeling. I remembered everything now. What I'd done, why I'd done it. I sobbed heavy, shaky sobs. They tore through my chest as the weight of my sins came upon me. This was why I was here in this cell. This was why I needed to repent. I had murdered the girl I loved. A girl who didn't even return my feelings, all for the sake of my sister. What kind of monster was I? I deserved to be here. I deserved to stay here forever. Mikenna! She appeared, this time her face clearer.
Do you remember?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have killed you. I shouldn't.
My death isn't why you're here. When you were a child, that night on the beach, your sister tried to cast her spell. You cast a spell of your own. You asked someone, anyone, to help you keep your sister. You opened a door, and in stepped what made your sister the way she was.
What? My fault. It was my fault from the beginning. I remembered that prayer. I didn't care if it was a spirit or an angel. My innocent mind had never considered the concept of... I looked up again at Mikenna. What must I do to atone? I'll do anything, please! Don't leave me here alone again!
Your punishment was to relive and to understand. Your punishment has concluded. You will be released.
Mikenna began to fade away, a sad smile on her face. Wait! Did you ever love me? Even for a moment?
No. I loved Kayden. I'm sorry.
And for the final time, I was alone. My shackles were gone and I stood alone in that cell, unsure of what to do next. There was no door. How was I to get out? I looked up at the valve. That was most likely it. I began to look around, hoping to find something I could use. It took me a while, but on the other side of the cell beyond my reach when I'd been bound was a folding ladder. Awkwardly, I lifted it to the center of the cell and opened it. It was just tall enough to reach. I began to climb, whispering a prayer the whole way up. If someday all of us can be reborn, I'd like us to be friends, so that we may leave this tragedy behind us. It took several tries, but the valve finally turned. With a labored push, the hatch opened, and a white light enveloped me.
All right, Len. On the count of 3, I want you to come back to us. You're going to remember everything you've said from the moment our session began. 1, 2, 3. I sat back in my chair and waited as the teenage boy's senses returned to him. He had told me about some of this nightmare before. I recalled in previous sessions he had talked about being trapped and needed to atone for something. It was almost an obsession. I didn't usually let sessions of hypnotherapy continue this long, but I didn't want to bring him back when there might be some kind of closure to be found in going deeper. I started to consider what factors might have allowed this outcome. This was the first time I'd let his twin sister, who had initially brought him to us, sit in on a session. Considering his story was highly centered around her, I wondered if her presence had been some kind of key to unlock all of the intricacies of this nightmare. I finally allowed my eyes to fall on Rin, who stared at her brother with such surprise and terror. I felt bad. Normally, I didn't allow spectators in on something like this, but Len had insisted she be here. I had bent the rules hoping we'd learn something new, and we did. How do you feel, Len? I handed him the glass of water from my desk. When he didn't take it, I put it back. It may take a moment to remember everything, so just let it sink in. I waited patiently for the boy to speak. The first thing he did was look at his sister.
Rin,
He reached out to take her hand. She pulled back and looked at me. I nodded at her, indicating it was all right, and she placed her hand in his.
Len, I'm so sorry.
Len, let's talk about this dream.
It's not a dream.
You believe that you're a manservant who killed a princess for his twin sister?
Not anymore, but I was. It was a past life, I think. That has to be it, right, Rin? We've been given a second chance.
Rin didn't seem sure what to say, so she smiled weakly at him and turned her attention to me.
Doctor, what do we do now?
I reached over my desk and pressed a button on the intercom. I asked the nurse who answered to have an orderly see Len back to his room.
Wait, what? You said you'd let me go home!
I'm afraid, Len, that we need to do at least one more session. Don't worry, Rin will be able to take you home next time. By this point, the orderly had arrived and was gently guiding Len out the door and to his room.
You said I could take him home!
Forgive me, Miss Kagamine, but I'd like to look into this delusion some more.
Why? Can't you just prove to him it's not real and send him home?
It's not that simple. Your brother must come to his own conclusions that the things he sees, this past life he believes in, isn't real. You brought him to me initially because he'd been hearing voices and seeing this girl he spoke of, this Mikenna. Would it surprise you to hear I've heard that name before?
It's a common name.
I heard that name from another patient, here, in this hospital. She told me a very similar story. I'd like to do another session with both him and Miss Ioane. I'd like you there as well. Would you please come back at the same time next Tuesday?
Yes, Doctor.
Hey guys, Kage here. I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped me out with Pastaween this year. October always tends to be a little crazy on this channel, so I try to make it amazing for all of you who love my creepypasta readings. Doesn't help that I'm a bit of a procrastinator. I know that the story of evil is tied to the Avilius Chronicles, and I love Mothy P's story, don't get me wrong. But when I first got into Vocaloid about 5-6 years ago, it was just Daughter of Evil, Servant of Evil, Regret Message, Rebirth Day, and eventually Daughter of White came out. There was also the 3 fan songs, Prince of Blue, Daughter of Vengeance, and Daughter of Green, and I had this vision in my head for this story as to how it would go down. And then the Avilius Chronicles came and everything got blown out of the water and it got a little complicated. But I wanted to go back to that original idea. And I've always liked the idea of a group of people being tied to each other through a series of past lives. And that's where the idea for this story came. And back then, I didn't know that the Daughter of Evil series was tied to the other songs in the Avilius Chronicles, and I don't think it was, like, officially a thing back then. I know there was the 7 Deadly Sins and that it was considered part of that, but it wasn't as big as it is now. So I wanted to take this song and tie it to other Vocaloid series that I like. And I'm not going to say which ones because I want it to be a surprise as to what's coming up next. I hope you all enjoyed this Pastaween, and if you're just joining us for this story, you can click that box on the left which will take you to the playlist for this month's entire list of stories. Or, if you want something a little different, you can click that box on the right which will take you to our latest Let's Voice Act series. Happy Pastaween! See you guys later! Bye!